coordinators for the Skills for Mindful Living series, and welcome you this evening. This series is a public services initiative, and it's also in conjunction with the Adler School that provides us with a venue, and the BC Association of Clinical Counselors, which some of you are members and some are not. Anyway, and it's intended to really service the population, the general public, and assist people with pretty pertinent issues that we all naturally experience, grief being one of them. So when we called out for speakers last year and Patrick offered to do a presentation on grief, we thought, wow, great. Unfortunately, it's something quite common, but it's a natural experience in life. I had the pleasure of working with Patrick in West Vancouver at the Community Center at Complement Healthcare. I don't know whether you're still working out there too?
No.
Okay, but he does, Patrick's quite amazing. He's quite a generalist, but he's got a lot of great little specialty areas. He's a registered psychologist as well as a member of the BCACC. And he's done all sorts of studies in different areas, stress being one of them, thus stressed out. He's got great CDs on helping relax. He's dealt with people with chronic pain, etc., etc. He's been in practice for over a dozen years. And he's here this evening to help us with grief. So without further ado, please welcome Patrick. And I just would like to remind you that we do videotape the sessions. If you have questions of a private nature, please hold them until after Patrick's discussion. And also, if you want to speak to them in private again, you're welcome to. And we always appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Beautiful. I offered a whole bunch of different topics to talk about, and I'm not exactly sure why they chose grief. It's such a morbid topic, but they did, and so here I am talking about grief tonight. Actually, a little bit later, about, I don't know, I think about 7 or 8 slides into, you'll see why I think that this is an important topic. So we'll get to that in a moment. Right now, I just wanted to ask how many people here are counselors? Everybody is, okay. And a few people who are not. How many people have experienced grief in the past? Yeah, pretty well everyone, right? And how many people are in the throes of grief right now? Yeah, sort of, okay. So, as Deb said, my name is Patrick Myers. I'm registered both as a psychologist and a clinical counselor. And just want to say some shout outs to hello? It was working a moment ago. This is going to be fun if we don't have this thing working. Let's see what happens if I do that. Okay, I'm going to hit this button and see what happens. Maybe the whole thing is frozen, which it appears like it has.
Do you want me to call up to the technician upstairs?
No, this is my computer, so I think it's having an argument with the projectors. It will eventually get going again. So I'm just going to start talking, and hopefully this thing will eventually right itself again. Tonight I'm going to cover a little bit about death and grief, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what grief is and the grieving process. Deb mentioned that I'm all over the place, and the closest place to here is I'm over at Mainland Medical Clinic. So if need be, I can be found over there. All right, oh, there we go. Somebody's saying hello. Let's see what happens when we do that. Yes, we know. If I do that, you're not going to be very nice to me, are you? So, start off with a couple little things that I've collected. So we have Kelly Gibram, who has a quote, "The deeper the sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is it not the cup that holds the wine, the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven?" We have an old Zen koan. The Zen koan goes, "Many monks came to study with the great Tibetan teacher Marpa. One day Marpa's oldest son was killed. Marpa was grieving deeply when one of the monks came to him and said, 'I don't understand. You teach us that all is an illusion, and yet you are crying. If all is an illusion, then why do you grieve so deeply?' To which Marpa replied, 'Indeed, everything is an illusion, and the death of a loved one is the greatest of these illusions.'" So, you still don't want to stop here, do you? What else we got? Okay.
Do you want to click on the process first and then add process?
I want to click on the process first.
The one that we...
Okay, we'll try that, see what happens. Sounds like a good idea. I'll go with it. Yeah, looks like we might get something. So, what might we grieve? So what might we grieve? What might we grieve? Loss of?
A loved one.
A loved one. What else might we grieve?
A transition in life.
A transition in life, such as?
Like from working to retirement.
Yes, retirement, yes. What else might we grieve?
Kids leaving home.
Kids leaving home, you betcha, you bet. Yes. Some people are glad when their kids leave home, and some people it's really hard on them. What else?
Loss of a pet, loss of a job.
Loss of a pet, loss of a job, yes.
End of a relationship.
End of a relationship, yeah.
Loss of
Anything else?
money in the
Right?
market. Loss of money in the market.
Losing money in the market. Okay, all right. Okay, so what happens if I do this? I hit you again. There's one other thing that I suggest that we might grieve, and that is the death of an ideal or the death of a belief. And I sometimes get this when I have people who come to me who've had a really rotten childhood, and they keep on asking themselves, why? And I say that, well, perhaps there is no answer to that. Maybe life is unfair. We need to grieve what you expected the perfect family would be like, and then start living our lives now. So that's one of the other things that yes, you were talking to me again, right? I don't know if that's going to do anything or not. All right, so, oh, maybe it will. So I start off with the person who first broke the doors wide open. That was a lady by the name of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Her first book was called On Death and Dying, and she came up with the 5 stages. All right, let's try this. She came up with this 5 stages of death and dying: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And then her last book was called On Grief and Grieving. And she did not live, whoops, there you are. She did not live long enough to be able to see that book published, but she did live long enough to complete that book. And so they have taken these same 5 stages and they've turned them around a little bit to the 5 stages of grieving. So denial would be something like, I can't believe that this individual is gone, or that this thing is gone. The anger was something like, it wasn't supposed to happen yet. We were supposed to sail off into retirement sunset, and yada, yada, yada. There's the bargaining, and I've heard a lot of this one. What if I took them to a different hospital? if only I had asked for a different doctor, and the person has a lot of guilt involved with that. There is the depression. It's so empty in my home. It's pointless to keep on going, things like this. And then, of course, we finally get to that stage of acceptance where we learn to live with the new reality. Now, a couple of things that Kubler-Ross later on pointed out is that there are other things that happen in grieving, that these stages, you don't necessarily go through them sequentially, that people don't necessarily experience all of these stages, and so she's acknowledged all this. And it's just, what she said was a guideline for what she sees in experience in talking to people who are dying and people who are grieving. And a wonderful little quote from Kubler-Ross in her last little bit was, "I'm so much more than 5 stages, and so are you. It's not about the life lost, but also the life lived." All right. Norman Wright had some other ideas on the idea of dying, the acute phase, the living dying phase, the terminal phase, and each of those had their respective emotions and behaviors. We have Colin Murray Parks, who took John Bowlby's attachment literature and started looking at the grieving aspect of it, and basically found that grieving followed Bowlby's attachment stuff quite closely. Oh, by the way, I should have noted this at the beginning, is that if you want these handouts, is that every now and then you'll see my email address flip up here. Copy that down, send me an email, and I'll send you the handouts on this, okay? There are some things that I talk about that aren't included on the slides, and there are some things that are included on the slides, but they sort of help remind you if you want, okay? So Colin Murray Parks took John Bowlby stuff, and he basically looked at this process, and again, he sort of looked at 4 phases, with starting off with the emotional numbness, the shock, and eventually leading to the 4th stage of compartmentalization and socialization and all that kind of stuff. Alrighty, who else we got? Ranger Westberg, again, different aspects of the grieving process, shock, emotional release, all the way down to acceptance. We have Teresa Rando's 6 R's of the grieving process. So recognize the loss, react to the separation, recollect the deceased and your relationship with the deceased, relinquish old attachments and old assumptions, readjust to the new world without forgetting the old, and finally reinvest your energies in a new world. So the next slide basically says why I put this presentation together, because this is what I see all too often, is that people come in and they don't know what the heck they're doing as far as the grieving process is. They don't understand it, they don't get it, all right? So Lily Pincus wrote the idea that while the literature of the 19th century was the literature of death, the literature of our time is that of sex. So I take that and I'm going to throw a little theory out to you guys. You can take it or leave it. It's up to you guys. And I basically say that back in the 1900s, we had very large families. And we had these large families with the expectation that probably half our children would not make it to adulthood, because there were all kinds of wonderful diseases, diphtheria, polio, and all this kind of stuff that was out there. And we just made the assumption we were going to lose children. And death and the rituals around death were part of society. The problem is that now we've gone and defeated most of those diseases. There's an awful lot of people on this planet. And now what happens is that we have much smaller families, 1 or 2 kids. And we put all our hopes and dreams into this one child. and we put all our hopes and dreams into getting them to move forward in life, and we've totally forgotten about the concept of death. And so people come in to me and they don't understand their tears. They don't understand a lot of the other symptoms that they're experiencing. So I think it's really important that, much as it's a morbid topic, is that we also want to start educating people about what is death, what is grieving. So children of parents who are not afraid of death are not afraid of life. In that sense, an education for death is an education for life. I saw this guy a couple of years ago out at UBC. He was doing a presentation, and I absolutely love this guy. Jaak Ponskep has basically gone and mapped the 7 emotional responses within the brain. And he's come up with some kind of weird names for them. So there is the one that we're talking about, the panic, grief, there's the care, the seeking, the lust, the rage, the fear, and the play. And he's actually gone and mapped these out, and he's found that these exist in all mammals and in the birds as well. So he suggests that this panic grief circuit evolved out of the general pain mechanisms that we have, all right? And that this psychic pain then forges our social bonds, makes us stick together. And of course, when we are in the panic grief state, what's happened is that this is the separation distress that we experience. So young children, you see it, but also when you lose something important to you, you're also going to find a similar kind of reaction. So separation distress triggers this grief panic reaction, and then if there is a return of the loved one or a return of the item or something like this, then what happens is the care circuitry starts being triggered, and then eventually that opens up the seeking circuitry. All right. Again, similar to what Bowlby was noting in his attachment work. So here's a little map of how Ponskep sees it. So it all starts off in an extremely primitive area of the brain, the PHE, otherwise known as the periaqueductal gray area. Yikes. And that projects up into the dorsal-medial thalamus. He's got so many of these fun places. And then that ends up in, which if you look at any kind of brain stuff, you'll notice this one, the anterior cingulate. And that's a big object of exploration in the neurosciences right now, is that anterior cingulate, because it deals with so many of the emotions. So there's Jaak. So what might we see in grief? We see all kinds of wonderful things, right? So we're going to see sadness, we're going to see sleep issues, we're going to see crying, we're going to see shock, we're going to see anxiety, panic, difficulty concentrating, loneliness, emaciation, rumination. Come on in, we're having a party.
Sorry.
Well, it's okay. I'm having a party anyway, so I don't know about the rest of you guys. The rest of you guys are sort of nodding off to sleep. There may be appetite disturbances, withdrawal, apathy, irritability, confusion. There's one that scares a lot of people in grief, and that is this idea of relief, right? You have, so for instance, my aunt, a favorite aunt of mine, don't know exactly what happened, probably some kind of brain aneurysm. She's baking cookies, and all of a sudden, clunk on the kitchen table, and she's gone. Wow. So in some ways, you're going, oh, thank God she didn't suffer like my other aunt did, right? So the relief is a kind of a scary one. Sometimes it also manifests in physical pains and symptoms, illness, all that kind of stuff. Grief is an extremely stressful experience to go through. And I don't know if any of you have seen the raised stress scale. Have any of you seen that thing? It's an old scale. Okay, we won't worry about it then. All right. So here we go. We're going for a roller coaster ride. All these symptoms, they sound a lot like what? Depression, right? Yeah. Or perhaps even madness. A lot of people come in and say, I think I'm going crazy. No, actually, this is a normal human response to loss. It's called grief. And unfortunately, the grieving process is a huge roller coaster ride. It's a roller coaster ride. Most roller coasters are a lot of fun. Most roller coasters go up and down, but eventually they slow down the up and downs, and eventually they come to a flat stop. The grieving process, well, it goes up and down, and it does get less, but the grief, unfortunately, bad news, good news, for some people, never goes away. What you will find is the healing process from grief is you will find that there is that the grieving itself will become less intense and less frequent. But you can't forget what you lost, right? And unfortunately, too many people want to come in for the quick fix, or too many doctors want to offer the quick fix. And that's one of the things that I try to advise against is go through the process. You'll go through it faster if you go through the process. What is the normal grieving? Well, if you've got a really good employer, they'll give you 4 days off bereavement pay. The DSM, this is the old DSM, suggests normal grieving take no longer than 2 months. After that, we're going to call it depression. Okay? But contrary to what the big bad psychiatric manual says, and contrary to what industry might say, the grief researchers will typically say that normal grieving will take place between 2 weeks to 2 years. So a person is still crying over a loved one after a year. Is that normal? Yes, absolutely. All right. Let's see, anything else I want to say about that one? I think that's pretty good. Okay. So one of the things I want to put out is that we're all snowflakes, we're all onions. Our grief is as unique as we are, all right? Not only that, but our grief over one thing is going to be very different compared to another thing. So don't compare yourself. Say, for instance, you know, if I take a look at myself, I've lost both parents, and losing my mother was really, really tough on me. Losing my dad, not so much. So don't compare yourself. Oh, I should be grieving dad more, or I should be grieving mom less. Don't compare. Every grief is going to be unique. And not only that, but everyone is a very unique individual. They have many layers to them. So uncovering grief is much like peeling an onion. You go layer after layer after layer after layer. All right? So it's really important to note that to clients, because too many clients get compared to other people, is to really point out that your grief is unique and it's okay. Don't compare yourself. God breaks the heart again and again and again until it stays open. So when I talk about the grieving process, I basically talk about the idea that the grieving process, I use 2 stories or 2 metaphors or 2 analogies. And one of the analogies that I use is if I were to physically have a knife drawn across my hand and there was a deep cut in my hand, there would be 2 things that would be quite obvious, and there would be a 3rd thing that would not be obvious. So what would be the 2 things that would be obvious if I cut my hand to myself? Blood all over the place, yes. What else would be obvious?
Pain.
Pain, yeah. huge pain. Why did I do that? The third thing that happens is that your mind is going to go sort of like this. Your focus of attention is going to go from out here, and it's going to become extremely focused on your pain. All right? Now, that's both a good thing and a bad thing when it comes to grieving. Where it's a good thing is that if I cut my hand, it's a good idea that I protect it, right? Yes. Here's where it comes the bad thing, though. If I cut my hand, I forget I have another hand that works. I have 2 feet that work, right? As do we have other people who we hold on to, other relationships that we hold on to. So the pain is there for a reason. Now, again, still continuing with this cut analogy, if I were a complete masochist, and I all of a sudden go, whoa, this is interesting. Wow, look at the pain, look at the blood. And I kept on watching my hand. Eventually I would notice something. I would notice that the blood starts to slow down and start to coagulate. And eventually a scab would form. Now there'd still be a whole pile of pain, but at least the blood would stop, right? And then if I were a complete masochist with a whole lot of time, if I continued to watch my hand, eventually I would notice that the pain starts to go down and something takes its place, itch, okay? And this is your body's way of saying, hold on, we're almost it, right? We've come from a way out here, we're slowly knitting things together, hold on, we're almost there, this is where we're headed for, okay? And so there's that itch. And eventually, the itch dies down, and eventually this scab falls off, and all that you have left is a scar, a trace of life. And I'm going to suggest that grieving is much the same way. Now, I use this analogy because, as we noted before, Sept said that these two things are related, and believe it or not, when we do brain scans of people, we find something very interesting. Person who is in physical pain, certain areas of the brain is going to light up and certain areas of the brain are going to not light up. When we do brain scans of people who are in emotional pain, certain areas of the brain are going to light up and certain areas of the brain are not going to light up, and guess what? There's a huge overlap. So this is why I use this physical cut analogy to try and explain that to clients, is that pain is pain, whether it's physical or emotional, right? So I'm going to come back to the cut analogy a little bit, but first I want to introduce my next analogy, and that's where I like to draw circles, or what are also referred to as a Venn diagram. Ooh, take back to math class. So if we take this circle on this side to be the whole of you, and if we take the circle on the other side to be the whole of the other thing or the other person, and then where they overlap, what that is that's the relationship that existed at one time, all right? So we have you, another, and a relationship. And then unfortunately what happens is this. And that is proverbial hole in the heart, metaphorically. And here you are bleeding out tears all over the place. This hurts. It's uncomfortable. It's something we want to escape. Nobody likes grief. Everyone wants it fixed yesterday. This hurts a lot, right? And eventually what happens is that there is a scab that forms. We start working through the process. And eventually what happens is then all that's left is you with a scar, a trace of life. All right? So, here's my process. Grief is like that cut. Grief is like a roller coaster. Grief is like a snowflake. It's unique. And we have our little Venn diagram to show the grieving process. So here's the grieving process in a nutshell. All right? So then, taking great liberties with the Buddhists, I paraphrase a statement that they make, and basically I say is, unless you die in childhood, in life, grief is mandatory. Suffering is optional. All right? Now, something that needs to be noted here is that when I cut my hand, I'm not in the special effects movies. So I'm not in one of these sci-fi movies, or I'm not in these vampire movies where I can just turn to my cut hand and go, heal. And like a zipper, it just zips back up again, right? There is an organic process that is beyond my control that knits my skin together again. And I'm going to propose that there is, again, an organic process that allows you to heal from your grief. Okay? So, with this organic process, then, there's a certain truth to time will heal all wounds, right? And so then we want to take a look at, okay, so what do we do about it? And basically I say that there are a couple of things that I can do to prolong the injury. There are a couple of things that I can do to prolong the grief. And there are some things that I can do to promote healing. It's not going to be instantaneous, but it will promote healing. So what are some things I can do with my hand to prolong grief? Or sorry, to prolong the injury? I could start using my hand right away, right? Starting to use it, that scab is very tenuous, it's going to get ripped open, all right? How do we prolong grief? Well, we prolong it by doing a bunch of things. We take care of everyone else, we deny our own emotions, we take on a new lover, all these kinds of things. And basically what ends up happening is this. We attempt to fill that hole because that hole hurts, right? And we attempt to fill that hole with, all of a sudden I'm going to work 16 hours a day at the office. All of a sudden I'm going to start drinking a lot, or other substances of choice. Or all of a sudden I'm going to take on a new lover. And quite often this is referred to as a rebound relationship, or what I say is you're basically trying to fill a hole with a hole. It doesn't work. It prolongs your grieving process. And I'm going to say that the way to promote the healing process to some degree is to ride that roller coaster. It's a horrible ride, but the more you're willing to ride, the more you promote the healing process. Hey, more people to join our party. Excellent. All right, so what would I do for the hand to promote healing? I would probably, well, it's dirty. I would probably wash it off, disinfect it, wrap it in a bandage, and then protect it, right? There's chairs over on this side if you want.
Okay.
Oh, you're okay, all right.
I can see better.
Good. Oh, yeah, okay, all right, good. So then basically I use that same analogy and I say, okay, so let's talk about the emotional banding. What do we want to do emotionally? And I say that there are 4 key elements that we want to do. There's a bunch of other stuff that we get to do as well. But there are 4 key elements that we want to do in our promotion of healing. Remember, though, that healing from grief, there is an organic process over which you have no control. But there is part of it over which you do have control, and so here's my emotional Band-Aid. All right, safe expression of emotions, self-care, rely on social supports, and create a ritual. So Proust says we are healed of the suffering only by experiencing it to the full. How many people know Les Greenberg? Here are a couple of people. He does. He sort of started. Name right now. Who does the EFT? Sue Johnson. Yeah, he was helpful in getting Sue Johnson to start. And then Edna Foa, she is from a completely different area, but again, they are talking about the processing of emotions, and they say that avoidance of relatively harmless emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and interactions does not allow disconfirming evidence to be incorporated into and to transform negative emotional states. So we got to go through the emotional process. So I say, safe expression of emotions. You're sitting in your office. Now some people would be comfortable doing this. I'm not. You're sitting in your office, somebody's telling you a really, really sad story, and it triggers your own grief. I'm going to suggest, now other people would disagree with me, which is fine. I'm going to suggest that that's not safe for your client. Your client might be inclined to want to try and now soothe you. You're supposed to be there for your client. Other people would disagree, which is fine. So I'm going to suggest that safe expression of emotions means you excuse yourself, you quickly run to the bathroom, you cry out the hard part, splash a little cold water on your face, take a few deep breaths, come back. You might want to fake it and bring in a piece of paper and say, well, I had to bring this piece of paper or something like that. Nobody knows the difference, right? You might think you have a leaky bowel, but other than that, nobody knows the difference. Okay. Anger. Here's a big one, right? Anger really needs that emotional expression. So I'm going to say, run around the block, full tilt, throw rocks into the river. That's actually what I did when my mom died. Bench press weights, you know, punch a punching bag, yell at a tree, maybe even kick that tree. You know, trees have a very different consciousness than we do. You kick a tree, and it's going to go, ooh, nice massage, right? One of the best ones, of course, is I've had the odd client who says, I make the best bread when I was grieving. Because you're just punching that dough, right? So, what else? Anxiety. You know, I mean, you guys give all kinds of ideas on how to deal with anxiety. Squeeze a pillow. What else have I got? Run. Do some 5 senses grounding. Really get them grounded back into their environment in a sensual way. These kinds of things. Confusion. You know, do some journaling. Carry around a notepad. Wonderful thing, these smartphones these days, you get to write it all into your smartphone if you want. So these are just different things. One other one, safe expression of emotions, relief. You might be inclined, you know, a lot of people have a celebration of life. You might be inclined to drink a little too much. I say, don't drink more than you normally would. Right? You do want to make it to work the next day, so. There's a sacredness in tears. They are not the mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love. I tell a lot of people that your tears are the way in which you are honoring person that you've lost. Because if there's no tears, then did you really love them? I don't know. So it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of honor. All right, so next one. Self-care. Some people, when they are going through the breathing process, they don't sleep so good. And either they sleep too much or they sleep too little. Sleeping too much, I don't worry about too much. Sleeping too little, I do, because sleep is such an integral part of everything in your life. And that's where I'm going to say, make sleep a priority in your life. Go to bed earlier, sleep in. Right? Worst case scenario, go to your doc, ask for a sleeping pill. All right? Sleep is integral. Another one. You're in a state of grief, and some people find that food just tastes like sawdust. I've got a friend right now who, he just recently lost his wife to cancer, and I saw him just, when was it, 3 weeks ago. The guy is skinny as a rail. I'm going, buddy, you gotta start eating. Right? So some people, the food tastes like sawdust, your appetite goes. Other people, they still have an appetite for sweets, for chips, for that kind of stuff. So it's easier to put pounds on than it is to take them off. So I say, I don't care, stuff the broccoli down your throat anyways. Try to eat something healthy in addition to your chips. Try to eat something even if it tastes like sawdust. And of course, my #1 intervention for just about everything is exercise. Exercise, exercise, exercise. A nice contemplative walk is a beautiful way to help deal with grief. Swim, jog, bike, gym, yoga, all kinds of wonderful things. Exercise is a real good thing. Why do I talk about self-care? Because here's the psychological process of you going through grief. It would be a real shame if you go through this psychological process, you end up here, but because you weren't taking care of your body looks like this now, right? That's a common occurrence. We find that a lot of people who go through grief do get very ill. So this is why I say self-care is so important, is because we want to arrive, body and soul, in the same place. All right? Okay, what else we got? Social support. Social support can sometimes provide physical and emotional support in your deepest moments of pain. Social support is also going to be those people who are going to drag you back into real life. They're going to be the people who make you realize that life is worth living. There is one problem with social supports. They're not very good at reading your mind. And so your social supports are going to say and do stupid things. I put it right out there. They're going to say and do stupid things. So, you're newly divorced. Here's something stupid somebody might say or do. Newly divorced. Oh, hey, meet Bob. He's a new divorcee too. You'd like him. Right? No. All right. People also say stupid things. One of the worst things that you can say to a person who's in grief, I know how you feel. God forbid. I have no clue as to how you feel. I can see you're pretty upset. There's tears streaming down your face. But I really don't know how you feel, because you had a very unique relationship with whatever it was that you lost. And you are a very unique individual in and of yourself. So I don't know exactly how you feel. I've been through the grieving process, yes. It sucked, yes. But I don't know how you feel, right? And so, dumb things to say. Here's another dumb one that people will say at death sometimes. Oh, you're in a better place now. How do you know? Did you go there and come back again? So, people are going to say and do stupid things that really aren't that helpful because they can't read your mind, okay? And they're going to use what they think might help them to help you. But they're unique in how they would need their help, and you're unique in how you want help, right? So you want to make sure that, so the two things that I suggest here is you want to be polite about it, but you're going to need to assert what you need, all right? Thank you, friend, for thinking about me, but what I really need right now is I need your shoulder to cry. What I really need right now is for you to just listen to me, not offer any advice. What I really need right now is, let's go for a jog. I need some exercise. What I really need right now is, I need you to tell me about your grandkids, because your grandkids, 2 years old, they're always getting into all kinds of fun trouble, and I really need to have some fun again, right? Tell people what you need, right? Because they can't read your mind. And then, of course, make sure that you also balance that with some time where you are going to curl up in fetal position on your bed crying. Granted, yes. So you need some time for yourself just to incorporate the loss, but you also need to allow yourself to be dragged out to your social supports, okay? Okay. I think that's good enough. And then here's the last one. Ritual. The goal is to strike a delicate balance between the past that should be remembered and the future that must be created. Ritual has a couple of things that it tries to do. It tries to honor the past and honor the future in the here and the now. That job, that partner, that child, whatever, helped create the person who you are today. And you need to be thankful for that in one way or another, right? For better or for worse, you need to honor what that person helped you to become today. And so that's important to do. However, at the same time, I don't know why they are gone. I'm not going to pretend to play that ability to be able to tell you that. All I know is that that thing or that person is gone. And you are still here. And you're here for a reason. I, again, don't pretend to know what it is. But you're here for a reason. And so the future is calling. All right? So, the typical death ritual that we have is, we have, you know, when a person dies, we bury them in the ground, we erect a gravestone. Right? And then on important anniversaries, we'll go to the grave, we'll say a little prayer, we'll leave a little, you know, some flowers. And one guy said he pours a little beer into the ground. A waste of beer, huh? And then we might have a few tears as well. So that ritual works really, really well for some people. For some people, that grieving ritual does not work. And I'm going to say that ritual should be something that is personal to you and something that is meaningful to you, okay? What is personal and meaningful to you, not what is meaningful and personal to others. So, what kinds of rituals might we have? So I'm going to try and recall some of the things that I've had people say. I had one woman who took care of her husband for many years as he was slowly dying. She was basically his, you know, his nurse through the entire thing. And then he finally ended up dying, and she was completely distraught. And she had canceled Christmas a couple of years. And finally she came to see me, and I talked a little bit about grief and talked about some of the things that I've talked about here. And then I talked about the idea of ritual. And so she finally came back and she said that, you know what I decided to do this year? I finally decided I'm going to host Christmas dinner again like I used to. So she called all her kids and all her grandkids to her home. They all, you know, are there, but everyone's kind of tense, right? Because they're not quite sure what mom, grandma is going to do. And so at the appropriate moment, the food is all out on the table, and my client stands up and says, I'd like to propose a toast to my deceased husband. Totally broke all the tension, and they had a wonderful Christmas dinner again, right? Beautiful. I had another client who came in, this would have been 8 years ago, I guess. She had been having problems with her teenage daughter, as we sometimes do. And so she came to me, she was asking me about, how to deal with her, cope with her 16-year-old. And right in the middle of the whole thing, her mother died. And both her daughter and my client both deeply loved this woman. And I again went through the spiel of the grieving process, and I talked about ritual. And then she came back again later, and she said that what her ritual was that her mother had been a painter, and she'd left behind a whole bunch of acrylic paintings. And so what my client did was she took a bunch of those acrylic paintings and laser photocopied them on one half of the page and folded it over. And inside she put her Christmas greetings to everyone. Of course, everyone is raving about her Christmas cards. Where do I get those Christmas cards? Unfortunately, those are extremely unique. Of course, the person that she was most concerned about was her daughter. How is daughter going to take this? And hopefully I can do this without choking up. Her daughter comes up to her mother and says, "Mom, that was really great. We have to do that every year." So I'm just choking up a little bit there. And that was the beginning of the reestablishing of the relationship between mother and daughter. That was this ritual. Beautiful, huh? Again, it's meaningful to that person, not necessarily to anybody else. One more grieving ritual. My mother is buried about 10,000 kilometers away. I can't go on important dates and say, "Hi, Mom, how you doing?" Right? To anybody else, that looks like a beat-up tin ball. To me, this is my ritual. Right? So ritual is something that is personal, meaningful. You get to wrap that person up in a box, wrap it with some nice wrapping paper, a nice bow tie on it, stick it up on the shelf, and on important dates, you take it down, unwrap it, stick your hand in, feel that. When you're done, you take your hand out, wrap her up again, stick it on the shelf. Okay? All right, so what are some of the other tasks? Of course, we have all the other stuff that we also have to deal with. We have the waiting to make major life decisions, cleaning up the old, bringing in the new, asking for help. That's a hard one for some people to do. Settling affairs, settling taxes, re-engage in old hobbies and interests that you were too busy to do while you were in a relationship. Well, now's a good time to start getting back into those hobbies and those interests. Start a memory box, organize the photos, learn new habits, tasks, knowledge, go to school, explore new foods, new music, new movies, new places, a beautiful one, volunteer. Some people, what are we doing to heal the healer, right? Here's a nice little saying. No one ever really dies as long as they took the time to leave us with fond memories. And one of the things that I put out to people is, sorry, we're all going to die sometime. But you have a choice in how you live your life and how you leave. You can live your life, and not only are we all going to die, but we're also going to all die with regrets. You have a choice here. You can die with a barrel full of regrets, a handful of memories, or you can die with a handful of regrets, a barrel full of memories. And of course, that's kind of a rhetorical statement, isn't it? So, establish some boundaries. And you know what? You have a heart. And in the case of separation, in the case of the death of a partner, why not give that heart to somebody else? You're capable of that love. Share it with somebody else who also needs some love. Okay? Of course, we have Mr. Bruce Fisher. If there are people who are divorcing, separating, we have the Building book. It's a wonderful book. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend it. I think most of us have that book. What else we got? We got the Footprints saying, and I'm not exactly sure who wrote the silly thing, because I've seen it credited to two different people. But basically, it's this story, and it ends where the individual is talking to God. He says, during the most trying periods of my life, there's only been one set of footprints in the sand. Why, God? Why, when I needed you the most, were you not there for me? And the Lord replied, the years you've seen only one set of footprints. That's when I carried you. So if you have a spiritual debt, there's something beautiful. Have faith. Things will get better. Now, the grieving process, I've suggested a couple of things. I've suggested safe expression of emotions, and I've suggested exercise. In particular, allowing those tears in. The body has some really cool mechanisms within them, and it's called endorphins. Endorphins are your own hormones that are your happy/pain-killing hormones. And there are 3 times when those hormones are released en masse. One is when you exercise, one is when you cry, and one is when you laugh. They say laughter is the best medicine. So, I'm going to leave you with this little thought here. Okay, Tim, it's your time to go. You can't fool me, man. I know for a fact you have to touch me to kill me. You'll have to chase me down first. Oh, darn. I can't believe you know my secret. You're a lot smarter than I thought. Great job, Tim. High five. There are tons of resources out there. I don't know, here's just a couple of them. And I think that's about it for me. Oh, you did go for the whole hour. Alrighty. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes?
Since we live in diverse...
Is it okay if we take this?
Pardon me?
Is it okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Since we live in a diverse cultural-based society, what's your observation, your practice about the cultural difference in grieving?
Cultural differences, what I've seen is that there are some cultures who are much more familiar with death and have some wonderful rituals around death. And that you'll find that these people have a tendency of being able to get through their grief a lot faster. And then you have other cultures that are going to see grief in a different way. And I think from my perspective is that what I'm talking about is more of a, rather than a cultural thing. Now, you're free to disagree with me, but I think what I'm looking at is more of an underlying process rather than the manifestation of the grieving process. Does that make sense? So I'm looking more at the underlying process of the grieving, and I've got my, what I've quoted as my 4 basic emotional bandages. Other cultures may see it a little differently. They may place different emphasis on it, but I would say that that's more the manifestation of grief. And every one of your clients is going to be different, and you're going to want to treat each one slightly differently.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to get a copy of your card. Is it the stressless@consultant.com?
Yep. Okay. Let's go party.